It's June. Your cucumber vines are climbing. Flowers everywhere. The leaves are full, dark green, and healthy enough to make you think everything is working. But there are no cucumbers. You check the soil, still moist. You check your fertilizer schedule. On track. You look under the leaves, along the stems, around every flower, and nothing looks wrong. So you water a little more. You add another round of fertilizer. You wait, and the flowers keep dropping. Here's what most gardeners never find out. Nearly half the pollen inside those flowers may have already lost its ability to work while the plant still looked completely healthy. The failure didn't start when the flower fell. It started earlier, quietly, inside the flower, on an afternoon that probably looked completely normal. And shade cloth is one of the few tools that can interrupt that damage before you ever see it. But the wrong shade cloth doesn't just fail to help. In some gardens, it makes the problem worse. And what makes it wrong has almost nothing to do with the percentage printed on the label. That's what you're about to find out. What decides whether your cucumber plant sets fruit in July isn't fertilizer or watering. It's something happening inside the flower at a level you can't see and can't fix after the fact. There are three things that decide whether shade cloth saves your cucumber plant or quietly slows it down. The first one is not the percentage. The second one is not even the heat itself. And the third one changes depending on where you live. Miss just one of them, and the same cloth that saves one garden can weaken another. But before the cloth, there's something happening inside the flower right now that most guides never explain. Look at a cucumber flower. From the outside, everything seems right. It opened on schedule. The color is correct. The stem is holding it upright. But inside that flower, a process may already be failing hours before the flower drops, days before you notice anything wrong. Picture a gardener in Tennessee checking her vines on a Wednesday morning in late June. Flowers everywhere. She watered the day before. Fertilizer is on schedule. She walks the row and counts maybe 30 flowers open across the bed. By Friday, 22 of them have dropped without setting fruit. She goes back through everything she did. Watering fine. Fertilizer fine. Pests nothing visible. The plant looks completely healthy. There's no obvious reason. The reason wasn't visible. It happened Tuesday afternoon when the temperature hit 96 degrees and stayed there for 6 hours. Cucumber pollen is more sensitive to heat than most gardeners realize. When air temperature climbs above 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the percentage of viable pollen drops from 95% down to 56%. Nearly half of the plant's ability to set fruit gone in a single afternoon. This was documented in cucumber male flower research published in Frontiers in Plant Science in 2021. At that point, pollen doesn't instantly vanish, but its reliability collapses fast enough that a healthy-looking plant can lose half its fruit-setting power by evening. Push it to 38 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and pollen tube growth stops completely, not during a heat emergency, just a regular summer day in the American South. The flowers dropping this week are the result of what the temperature did last week. You are looking at the consequence, not the cause. This is why shade cloth matters in summer, not as decoration, not as an optional upgrade, but as the one intervention that reaches the flower before the damage does. The question is whether the cloth you choose actually does that job. If you've already put up shade cloth and still aren't seeing results, what comes next is exactly why. You bought the cloth. You put it up. You followed the video. And in July, the flowers still dropped. That frustration doesn't come from ignoring advice. It comes from doing exactly what you were told and still failing. Most shade cloth guides give one number and stop. 40%. No color. No timing. No climate difference. So two gardeners follow the same instruction and only one gets cucumbers. The missing piece may already be hanging above your plants. Most gardeners buy black shade cloth. It's the cheapest option, the most available, the one stocked at every garden center. That choice makes sense until you understand what black cloth actually does in summer heat. Black fabric absorbs solar radiation. Then it re-radiates that heat back downward, directly toward the plant canopy it's supposed to be protecting. A black shade cloth at 30% density reduces air temperature underneath by roughly 4 to 7 degrees Celsius. That sounds useful until you compare it to white cloth, which reduces temperature by 6 to 10 degrees. Or aluminized cloth aluminate, which reflects heat away from the plant entirely and drops canopy temperature by 8 to 10 degrees. You're not just choosing a color. You're choosing whether the cloth reflects heat away from the flowers or pushes it back down onto the pollen that's already struggling to survive. A research trial published in Ciencia Rural in 2018 compared shade cloth colors directly on cucumber production. Pearl-colored cloth at 30% shade increased cucumber yield by 71% compared to black cloth at the same 30%. Same percentage, same crop, same basic purpose, different result. That is the part most home gardeners are never told. Two shade cloths can both say 30% on the label and create completely different worlds underneath them. One reflects heat away from the flowers. The other absorbs heat, holds it, and can push part of that heat back into the canopy. So when a gardener says, "I tried 30% shade cloth and it didn't work," the real question is not just how much shade they used. It's what kind of heat environment they created above the pollen. Commercial growers know this. Most home garden guides still don't say it. The right color is the first decision. The second is percentage. And that answer changes completely depending on where your garden is located. But there's one more problem. Even gardeners who buy the right color still get this wrong. Before moving forward, check the cloth you already have up. If it's black, that is the first thing to change before percentage, before timing. But color alone still isn't enough. A gardener in Minnesota and a gardener in Florida need completely different setups. Here is how to tell which one applies to you. Same cucumber plant, same variety, same care routine. But the shade cloth setup that keeps a garden producing in North Carolina through July will slow growth in Michigan if you use it the same way. The difference is climate zone, and the percentage, color, and timing that works for one zone can actively hurt production in another. This is where two gardens can look identical on camera and behave completely differently in real life. Zones 5 and 6, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and similar northern states. Summer is short, and the plant needs every hour of light it can get. Use 30% shade cloth, white or aluminized, only when temperatures are consistently pushing past 35 degrees Celsius. Put it up too early or go too dense, and you slow the plant down. In these zones, shade cloth is not seasonal. It's an emergency response. Zones 7 and 8, Tennessee, North Carolina, Arkansas, and the Mid-Atlantic states. Heat runs from May through August, with afternoons that regularly push pollen viability below the threshold. Start with 30 to 40% cloth, white or aluminate, by early May. This is where the gap shows up most clearly when color, percentage, and timing are finally matched to the heat. Zones 9 and 10, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Southern California. Radiation is extreme from April onward. 40 to 50% shade cloth is the baseline. Aluminized cloth is the first choice because it reflects rather than absorbs. Install by early April and keep it up until temperatures stay below 30 degrees Celsius in fall. Before you buy the cloth, 3 questions. What zone am I in? Which color? When do I install? Those 3 answers, in order, are what the percentage on the label can't tell you. But knowing the right percentage and color still isn't enough if you install at the wrong time. None of it works the way it should. And timing is the variable most gardeners get wrong, not from lack of care, but because no one has ever given them a specific threshold to watch for. You know the right color now. You know the right percentage for your zone. There's one variable left, and it determines whether everything you just learned actually works or sits up there doing less than it should. Most gardeners put up shade cloth when they see flowers starting to drop. By that point, the damage to pollen viability happened last week. The loss occurred before the symptom appeared. Putting up the cloth after the flowers fall is like treating a burn after the skin is already gone. The threshold is specific. Install when daytime temperatures are consistently above 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Not when the thermometer hits 40. Not when you notice the flowers dropping. At 35 degrees, pollen viability is already declining. That's the intervention point, not the observation point. For removal, in zones 5 through 8, take the cloth down in early September. Leave it up too long, and the plant loses light during the part of the season when heat is no longer the main threat. Growth slows, humidity builds, and powdery mildew becomes more likely. The right cloth installed at the wrong time gives you a fraction of the result. Timing isn't a feeling, it's the thermometer reading 2 days in a row. 3 things to track: daytime temperature, the color of cloth you have up, and the 35-degree threshold. When all 3 are aligned, that's when you act. So before you buy anything or before you change what's already up, this is the decision in the order it needs to happen. Start with the thermometer, not the store. If daytime temperatures in your area are not consistently crossing 35 degrees Celsius, shade cloth is not the priority right now. Come back to it when they are. When they are, check what you have up. If it's black, that comes down first before you change anything else. Replace it with white or aluminize before you adjust the percentage. A corrected percentage with the wrong color is still the wrong setup. Once the color is right, match the percentage to your zone. Zones 5 and 6, 30% and only during the heat. Zones 7 and 8, 30 to 40% from May through August. Zones 9 and 10, 40 to 50% from April, kept up until the thermometer drops and stays below 30 degrees Celsius. That sequence, temperature first, then color, then percentage, is the part the label on the package can't tell you. It's also the part that determines whether the cloth you put up actually protects the pollen or just sits there looking like it should be working. The next time temperatures push past 95 degrees Fahrenheit, you won't stand at the edge of the garden guessing. You'll know the pollen inside those flowers may have been compromised before the first one fell. You'll know whether the cloth above the plant is reflecting heat away or pushing it back down. And you'll know the real window to act opens at 35 degrees Celsius before the damage shows up. Your garden didn't fail because you weren't trying hard enough. It was missing this sequence. Temperature first, color second, percentage third. But once shade cloth goes up, the plant is growing in a different microclimate. The light changes. The moisture changes. The root zone changes. And that changes what it needs from the soil. The next video shows exactly how to adjust fertilizer once shade cloth goes up, the timing, the dose, and why the old schedule can quietly work against the plant.